Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again as we continue to scrutinise the podcast created by Ian Doyle in conjunction with the Irish Sun and Irish Sun editor Stephen Breen. And obviously, the name of the podcast is Making the Detective. It outlines the career of Senior Investigating Officer Mr. Pat Barry, and we are detailing and looking at the podcasts that are made in relation to the Mullen robbery at Lordship Credit Union. Now, we've moved on. And we're now covering the 11th part of the series of podcasts, and it's called Undercover. And we have done one video on part 11 already, and this is the second. And this is a very general look. This is actually a quick video. It's a general look at the investigation in New York. And the information given on this podcast shows the banality and the mediocrity of anything that give any credence to anything got to do with the Mullen robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And how again we see the mainstream media peddling information and a story that simply has no bearing on what happened at the car park at Lordship Credit Union. And the podcast, this little bit we're going to look at quickly tonight, is just in relation to the two detectives who were assigned to follow Aaron in New York. So we've done a little bit on it at the end of the video last night. So we're just going to have another little listen to a couple of clips, analyse them, and again we're going to pick out very important details that are there when the storyboard created by the media and Garda Síochána is questioned and scrutinised. So we're going to have a quick listen to the first clip, and this is coming from Making of a Detective, episode number 11.
Similar to Pat, as an undercover investigator, Eddie rarely switched off outside of his working hours. He'd tip away at work from his home, and always would be aware of his surroundings while out. New York City in the summertime is unlike anywhere else on the planet. There is a huge community feeling that sweeps across the 5 boroughs as outdoor events take up street corners and public parks. It was a hot summer's day, and Eddie had the weekend off.
And I was going to go to a street fair. They were just setting up.
He'd seen online that a community party was taking place in a neighbourhood he frequented in the Bronx. With nothing else on his agenda, he made his way over.
So they were putting the block in the streets and the vendors and everybody was there.
While waiting for the festivities to commence, Eddie heard the loud noise of a heavy material object being dragged along the tarmac. He turned around to see what was going on and to make sure he wasn't in the way. A man in his 20s, slightly burned from the sun, dragged a bouncing castle closer and closer to the corner that Eddie was standing on, sporting bushy stubble, a navy GAA jersey, and familiar short dark hair. It looked like Aaron Brady. But Eddie couldn't be sure.
So I had his picture on my phone. I kept looking back and forth. At which time, as I seen him setting up the bouncy balloons for the kids. So he's blowing it up. I really wanted to make sure, so I sent a picture to Jimmy. Jimmy said, "That's him, Eddie."
We've heard there from New York undercover police officer Eddie Gonzalez, and the extent of his surveillance that day was that he found Aaron Brady pulling a bouncy castle down the street, blowing it up for the kids during the course of a family day in the Bronx. So obviously there's all sorts of banality and different things in relation to surveillance, but the object of surveillance is obviously to gather information that can be taken forward into a court of law. And nothing of what Gonzalez and Walsh found during the course of the surveillance had anything whatsoever. Nothing got to do with the murder and robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And all Mr. Gonzalez observed was Aaron pulling a bouncy castle down the street. Now, if Mr. Doyle and Mr. Breen were interested in the whole case. There is actually photographs of star witness Daniel Cahill on the street in New York wielding a machete, attacking a group of people, for which he went to court in relation to that attack. There's also the situation where Daniel Cahill was found with cannabis and steroids, which will be mentioned in the next podcast. Now imagine if Aaron Brady had been found with steroids or cannabis and not a bouncy castle for kids. It would be a whole different scenario. So we must give that objective and show people that there is a concerted effort by the media to portray a story that simply is fictional and is fluffy, and it perpetrates a story that was created by the authorities here in Ireland. And mainstream media are quite happy to peddle this nonsense and not delve down and look into the realities of what was happening in New York. On that day, Aaron Brady was legal in New York. He should have been arrested and deported. There was no reason whatsoever to keep Aaron Brady in New York. But we'll discover that as we move forward, why that was and why that didn't happen on that day. We're going to listen now to Eddie Gonzalez's partner, Jimmy Walsh.
James cancelled his plans for that afternoon and made his way across the city to join in the surveillance.
During that time, I'm observing him. He's very leery, looking all around. You know, he was aware of his surroundings. He really wanted to know what was going on. I took the pictures of the cart that he had, the trailer, the license plates again, his activity, nonchalant, like he never did nothing wrong. But in my experience, I could tell that he was like, okay, is the hammer ever gonna come? He's looking around.
We were able to set up a surveillance on him, which entailed him, when he got to Gaelic Park, him leaving, we were able to set up with several cars and be able to follow him back to his residence. And from that, we could set up patterns of his existence at that time, work, where he would go, and we were able to follow him from there.
So that was the lead detective, I think, in the surveillance from New York NYPD, Jimmy Walsh. And again, he goes into a little bit of detail about they had to set up cars from Gaelic Park to follow Aaron Brady back to his residence. Again, it doesn't really mean anything, but I think it would have been very easy to follow Aaron from either Ned's or the Heritage or Clark's and follow him around the corner, 3 or 4 minute walk to First Street, where he was actually living. But again, if we go into more detail into Mr. Walsh's interview with the Irish press, he talks some absolute and complete and utter rubbish. Now, there are a number of articles, they're in the Irish Sun, they're in the Irish Independent, and Mr. Walsh again eulogizes about this operation of following Aaron Brady round, that Aaron Brady went to football, he went to work, and he went drinking. He went to football, he went to work, he went drinking. Nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever. And we have here, just to put up on the screen, you can see there, a seasoned cross-border bandit. He was also forensically aware and even took his own water bottles home after playing at Gaelic Park in the Bronx so as not to leave DNA behind. You are a complete and utter idiot, Mr. Walsh, if you think everyone is going to buy that nonsense. What reason would Aaron Brady have to hide his DNA in New York? Absolutely none. Aaron was obviously in trouble here for racking the cars and ramming the Garda van in Dundalk. That his fingerprints, his DNA, you had everything. You had Aaron Brady there in front of you, and you're talking absolute nonsense about DNA in a water bottle. He took a water bottle to Gaelic Park and he took a water bottle home. Are you absolutely for real, Mr. Walsh? And the only reason you're putting that in there again is to fluff up a story that is complete and utter nonsense and has absolutely nothing got to do with the murder and robbery at Lordship Credit Union and the death of Garda Adrian Donahue. And this is the stuff that has been peddled by on Garda Síochána and the mainstream media. And it's very important to understand this. It seems to be a problem that Aaron Brady's carrying home a water bottle, and we have Daniel Cahill carrying the machete. And there doesn't seem to be any more investigation into that. And again, we're just going to have another quick listen to Eddie Gonzalez and just have a look at the contradictions and again, the complete and utter nonsense coming from one of New York's finest.
Again, my opinion, what I observed and what I saw other photos and everything and read some reports, he just walked around like he just got away with scot-free. Went to the pubs, drank. Again, some of our investigation, he boasted like, hey, I did something crazy, like he thought it was okay.
Eddie Gonzalez there again, one of New York's finest undercover detectives, which I have no reason to doubt. But again, for the purpose of this podcast and for the purpose of the investigation into Aaron Brady, complete and utter nonsense, and it's totally contradictory. Mr. Gonzalez says he was leery, he was aware of surroundings, he was watching what was going on. And then in the next sentence, he says he was nonchalant, as if he never done anything. So he was relaxed and completely at ease. But yet, Eddie tells us that Eddie is aware that Aaron Brady's thinking that there's something going to happen, that when is the hammer going to fall? Like, in relation to a serious investigation and serious journalism, what is that all about? Other than trying to create a narrative that simply does not exist and put a background story into a story that does not exist. And again, when you're telling lies and making stories up, there's always false, and people fall through the cracks from the story they have created. Because none of that, either what Jimmy Walsh is saying or what Eddie Gonzalez is saying, makes any sense whatsoever. And we just listen to another clip now, and it highlights the fluffiness of this journalism and the pathetic attempt to make a serious podcast in relation to a very, very, very serious crime.
It's attached to the club. The bouncy castle he was dragging towards the party, that was organised by the team. Eddie believes that although he seemed to be enjoying himself stateside, he also must have been living in fear, a lingering thought of when time might run out.
In the back of your mind, I think you're always going to feel that someday it may happen. But he was so brandished that he didn't care. Did he look leery? Did he look around? Yes. But again, I think he's just going to be that way until he got caught. So again, his lifestyle, for me, if it would have been me, I'd be scared. I wouldn't even show my face. But he would go all up and down McLean and have a good time. I don't understand that, knowing that he committed this horrific crime.
Eddie Gonzalez there again with more very insightful input into this podcast. And there's a number of little things there. Again, he totally contradicts himself. He talks about being, didn't care, he was leery, he was looking around, and an interesting fact he says there, I did something crazy. Now Eddie was involved in the investigation, and Aaron Brady was supposed to have allegedly said that he shot a cop. I think that's a massive omission there from Eddie, because I'd say, I would imagine Eddie quite possibly knows that the criminals that give statements against Aaron, their statements are false. And Eddie has to fluff the thing up a little bit, and he couldn't say it there. I know if it was a case that Aaron was going round in the pubs or saying it to anyone in Yonkers and Eddie was aware of it, Eddie would be telling us. Eddie's very fond of telling stories. So if Eddie had that information, Eddie would part with it on this podcast. So it's just an interesting point. Again, it's just background stuff, but it gives you, the public, a clear insight into how this was put together. And then Eddie goes on to say, going up and down McLean, having a good time. I didn't understand that, knowing he had committed this horrific crime. So, well, the reason he was going up and down McLean having a good time, Eddie, was, and this is to all the public and to the authorities, he didn't commit the horrific crime. And if we are to believe any of what the other criminals told us in relation to their statements against Aaron, crying into his pint, feeling remorseful, feeling the guilt burning him and affecting him, how would Aaron Brady have a successful life as is detailed by the authorities? And I just put up here, there's another piece from Jim Walsh, where he said Aaron Brady had 3 work checks in his possession when he was stopped, over $5,000. So he was doing well, he was working, he had his partner, and he was working in a construction company and actually considering going out on his own. So going out on his own as regards construction work and machinery. And we have to believe, so we have to look at those 2 stories very carefully. And we have the facts that Aaron was doing well, he had money, he had a girlfriend, he had a steady relationship, he was involved in sport, he had the possibility of opening up a new business and going forward on his own. And yet these other people are telling us that Aaron Brady's crying into a pint, he's feeling remorseful, he can't carry around the guilt. The two don't marry, they don't work together. So the facts are Aaron was doing well in America. The lies are he was crying into pints and telling stories about his remorse and his guilt. Those are the lies. And here we have Ian Doyle, an investigative reporter. It's not thrown out there to even question, how was Brady able to be so relatively successful and moving forward with his life, and on the other hand we're being told he's a quivering wreck? The 2 don't add up. And the facts are borne out to this day. Aaron has had 5 years incarcerated here in Ireland. And he's as strong as the day he was pulling that bouncy castle in New York. He's mentally strong, he's physically strong, and he's looking forward to his appeal and his release. Is that the story of a quivering wreck? They even told lies in the court to reporters about Aaron Brady crying when he was taken down after being found guilty. I've spoken to the prison officer and 2 prison officers there that day. Aaron didn't cry, and Aaron was brought back up, went to the court, and he spoke to myself and Lorraine. There was no tears. Let's get our shoulder to the wheel and change this wrongful conviction. So this bullshit peddled by Ian Doyle, Stephen Breen and this podcast is done for a reason, to betray a story that simply does not exist. And we're just going to listen to one little clip now, and again it gives us very, very vital information about what we say is the clear decision by the authorities to leave Aaron Brady in America, because that was the only way they could find out that he was the shooter, which is totally impossible. But however, we'll look at that now in 1 second. Just listen to this last clip.
Accounting for Brady's movements was only half the battle. The Gardaí still needed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he was responsible for the crime, particularly as the man who pulled the trigger during the raid. So far, the evidence was lacking. Brady's weak alibi proved he was hiding something, but it didn't prove he was the one who shot Adrian Donoghue. The Gardaí needed more.
This clip is very, very insightful indeed. So we see half the battle, they had absolutely no evidence, and we know that for a fact from Pat Marry's own mouth and from the condition the incident room was in. even by 2016, that nothing, no, we have nothing. No breaks, no nothing. So they had nothing, and they had to, so all of a sudden they had to get from having absolutely no evidence whatsoever to get to a situation was, particularly, he is the man who pulled the trigger. Now, we have to realise at this point in time that the incident room and the members of the Garda Síochána who went to New York knew that the man who shot and murdered Adrian Donahue was 6'1" or possibly 6'2". They were more than aware that Aaron Brady was only 5'7". And we cannot lose sight of this fact. Those people getting on the plane in Dublin Airport, flying to New York, knew that Aaron Brady could not be the man who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donahue. And that's the mistake the guards made when they went to America to get criminals to tell lies. They got them to tell lies that Aaron Brady said he shot the cop. Because that's totally impossible. Now, you might have had a chance that you had to get them to tell lies and say, I was there, and someone else shot the cop. But you didn't think it was going to be scrutinised and questioned. And you thought you could railroad this because it's such a sad case, first and foremost. But it's such a high tensions, and obviously the Irish public and everybody wants justice for what happened to Detective Garda Adrian Donahue. But I repeat again, those people who got on the plane from Dundalk Garda Barrack, Fort Apache as it is known, got on the plane to go to America, knew they were going to peddle lies. And that's the mistake they made. They went too far with their curated and manufactured story. And then we said, so far the evidence was lacking. He tells us again, no evidence. Circumstantial evidence that meant absolutely nothing. And even the circumstantial evidence is so heavily tampered with. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now it says also, Brady's had a weak alibi, and which proved he had something to hide. How does having a weak alibi prove you have something to hide? He was in the yard laundering diesel, and there was no one else around him. And if it was a case, as if Brendan Graham, senior counsel for the prosecution, told us on numerous occasions, there was a myriad of people involved outside the five that committed the crime. Surely between 9 or 10 of them, Aaron Brady could have said, well, I was here or there, I was in a specific place with someone. But the truth is, Aaron was in the yard in Cullerville loading tubes of diesel. That's why his alibi is weak. Having a weak alibi doesn't prove your guilt. And this is what these people are trying to portray here. I don't know whether it was Ian Doyle or Breen said it there. How does having a weak alibi prove anything? And the final bit is, Gardaí needed more. They most certainly did need more. They went, they got Christopher, they got Daniel, got poor Molly. People to twist and tell stories and tell lies. They forced people who had extradition warrants to tell lies and made the extradition warrants disappear. We'll go into more details with the gentleman with the ammunition and the drugs here in Ireland. First cousin of Christopher's, Anthony, first cousin of Christopher's. They got him because he was in serious trouble if he came back to Ireland in all different manners. So that gives you an idea of the fluffiness of what they're doing here with Eddie and Jimmy. But the most important part is it shows clearly a willingness by the mainstream media, and in this case it's Doyle, Breen and the Irish Sun, who are peddling a story. They never asked one question, and they still haven't asked Pat Marry, where is Matt Katsky? And Katsky was up to his neck in all this collusion and corruption and coercion. So the next part of this video is probably going to take 2 or 3 videos to break down the next 16 minutes. It's where Pat Marry introduces us to Christopher, a man who came forward and said, Brady told me he shot the guard. a layer from Mike in County Armagh. And I can say that unequivocally, and I will show that in the next video. And we'll go into more detail in relation to Christopher's dealings with Pat Murray and Bobby Ogle, 2 detectives in America. And we'll dissect that, and we'll show the disgusting behaviour of this man, Mr. Pat Murray, and what lengths he would have went to prove that to his superiors he was going to get someone for Adrian Donoghue's mother, because he hated them bastards looking down at him and making little of him and bypassing him for promotions and moving him off the case, asking him to co-manage a case that was his. That's Pat Mallory's opinion. It was his case. And we'll see the lengths. I will show quite clearly in the next video the lengths Pat Murray was willing to go to and the lies he's willing to tell to try and create a persona and some sort of legendary status for himself, which I think is, listening to him on these podcasts thus far, is quite clear to see. So we'll have started those videos tomorrow night. I'm not sure if it's going to be 2 or 3. We'll see how much detail we break down on it. And thank you again for joining us. Please continue to like, comment and share, and please pop over to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and help us fight the battle against the attack on Aaron's campaign on social media and on the internet. Thank you once again, and we'll see you for Pat Murray and Christopher's video tomorrow evening. Thank you.